And welcome into this week's edition of The Locker Room. I'm your host, Cade Crenshaw, joined today by Braden Maloy as we take a look at the top candidates to replace Will Muschamp as head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks. Braden, the news came down on Sunday night. 5 seasons was all it took for Will Muschamp to pack his bags out of Columbia. Looking at this new list of candidates, they have 3 games left. Mike Bobo has been named the interim, but Ray Tanner said this week that preferably they want a name in place before December 16th signing day. So looking at these top candidates, what name sticks out to you first?
Well, I think there's a lot of candidates that obviously come up when all the top kind of programs lose their head coach. And I also think by signing day is going to be a little tough because they haven't even played conference championship games. So a lot of these coaches will still have their jobs going into this signing period. But I think the names you got to look at, Hugh Freeze is kind of like the big one that everybody's throwing around. He's the head coach at Liberty at the moment. He's been 16-5 since he's been to Liberty. The highest rank is AP top 20 number 21 in the AP poll, which is just incredible. If you look at the way he's developed the quarterbacks he has, Malik Wilson, a transfer from Auburn, if they were not on Liberty, he would be a Heisman candidate. He is just putting up that kind of numbers. When he has SEC experience, he coached at Ole Miss. He took them to 2 New Year's Six bowl games. He also beat Bama twice in his time there at Ole Miss. So he's definitely a big candidate. However, he just signed a new contract with Liberty. So you're going to have some contract negotiation, maybe another buyout there. Another one that's I think could be on there is Steve Sarcasian. He's the Alabama head, offensive coordinator. You've seen what he's done with that offense. I mean, they are one of the top in the league, and he's done it both with Tua and Mac Jones. He has head coaching experience. He head coached at University of Southern California. He also has NFL experience. He worked with the Falcons. So he kind of has that leadership role. And he knows kind of how to run an offense. He's also in the Saban tree. He's been under Saban. He kind of knows how to run a top-tier program.
Let's start with Hugh Freeze there. Obviously in his second season up at Liberty, and you mentioned his SEC experience. He also has SEC scandal experience on his resume, which I think hurts them. And, for Hugh Freeze, he has all the coaching credentials you want. He wins football games. He develops players, and he can recruit. There's no doubt about him. He's taken a team at Liberty. We're not talking Alabama here. We're talking about the Liberty Flames and taking them to an AP poll ranking for the first time in school history. The issue, though, is will Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, allow him back into the SEC? Because it seems like for the last few years, he's almost been blacklisted from the SEC. That's why he didn't get the Auburn OC job a few years ago. That's why he didn't get the Alabama OC job or offensive analyst position, even if you want to call it. There's a reason he's been blackmailed and not allowed back at 2 SEC schools because any coaching decision in the SEC has to be approved by the conference commissioner, Greg Sankey. So I think the question for me about Hugh Freeze is Greg Sankey okay with it? Has enough time passed, from let's look back to 2016, has enough time passed for Hugh Freeze to say, okay, enough time's passed where we can offer forgiveness. We can look back and see where you messed up there with the recruiting scandals and things that went wrong at Ole Miss off the field. And when we've given you enough time to essentially you do the crime, do the time, so to speak, right? And has Hugh Freeze done enough time? Do you think is there anything that hinders Hugh Freeze from coming back into the SEC outside of Greg Sankey's decision?
I think maybe we come to an age now, kind of with social media and everything, a lot of fan pushback. Like fans, they have a lot to say, as much as we don't think they do. The outlash a university could get for hiring a coach that has previous scandals and ones to the caliber that he does definitely plays a role in it. I think Greg Sankey's is first the biggest decision, of course, just to allow that possibility. But then you have Ray Tanner, who has to do what's best for the university, and he'll get the feelings of everybody involved with the program, including the fans. And I think if you can't win the fans over with a Hugh Freeze because they're still latched on, I think it will be very hard to win them over if you hire him as a head coach.
Now, you mentioned Steve Sarcasian there, the Alabama offensive coordinator, potentially looking to make his way into a head coaching role once again. You mentioned his previous stop at Southern Cal. Obviously, that did not work out as well as anybody would have hoped for the Trojans. But you look at Steve Sarcasian, he's got national championship credentials, right? Look at how he's recruited Alabama, obviously brought Tua Tagovailoa along into the player he is now. So Sarkisian brings along those credentials. I think he's a strong candidate too. I think, let's look at this South Carolina job, right? And let's ask ourselves, is this an attractive job? I think the answer is yes, right? I think you look at this program, 4 losing seasons in the last 20 years. I mean, this is a program that consistently wins. They're not at the high championship caliber level. They're not Alabama, right? They're not Ohio State walking out of the tunnel. But this isn't a program that's going to be walked all over in the SEC for sure. I mean, I think for fan expectation, if you come here and you win 9, 10 ball games a year, you're going to be liked in Columbia. I mean, let's look at Steve Spurrier. Steve Spurrier never won a national championship, but he won 11 games and a division championship. And I think, the marks for being a successful coach at South Carolina, competing and possibly even beating Florida and Georgia, and then competing in the division and having a winning record. You go in, you get the games that you're supposed to win. You're supposed to beat the Vanderbilts. You're supposed to beat the Kentuckys even some years, and even now Tennessee, just depending on the year. You're supposed to win those games in the SEC East as a South Carolina head coach, and Will Muschamp just wasn't doing that. Muschamp was a player's coach. He was loved by his players, and he recruited some top-tier talent, 4 and 5 stars all across the country. But they just didn't translate into wins, and Ray Tanner said that was the bottom line. It's just they didn't translate into wins. The next head coach coming in, obviously people say you need time to build the program, and rightfully so. But let's not look back on South Carolina football's history with a bad look. They've had some good name and big-time coaches here. Lou Holtz, Steve Spurrier. There have been some big-time stops here in Columbia, and I think there's a lot of names out there that could maybe be that next position to come in and have to rebuild this program back to even your early 2010s with Connor Shaw and Javion Clowney and Marcus Lattimore and Steve Spurrier, where they went and had that 11-win season and finished it off in Atlanta. Now let's move on here from Hugh Freeze and Steve Sarcasian to another guy who's really bolstered his name in the offseason. How about Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina? What an amazing job he's done. He steps in just his second year, 16-15 overall, but an incredible job he's done with the Chanticleers. Take me through Chadwell here. Obviously, Coastal Carolina, not a premier program across the country, but let's face it, neither is Liberty. The difference, though, with Chadwell, though, is he doesn't have that SEC experience that maybe Hugh Freeze is going to submit on his resume later ahead. Now, let's look at Jamie Chadwell here. Is he ready for an SEC job?
I think so, and I think like you'd mentioned, he's coming into a program that's not being built up from the bottom. We still have the top-level 4-star guys here. We're still a mid-tier to above-average team at Carolina, so I think that will help. He's not having to rebuild an entire program. If you look at it, he's 7-0 with Coastal right now. They have AP ranked number 15. That is the highest ranking for any Sun Belt team ever. He is doing amazing things down there at the Coast. And he spent his majority of career in South Carolina. He's gone from school to school here, so he's familiar. I think that helps recruiting-wise, getting those in-state guys. As a coach, you want to win your state at least. And I think with him being kind of raised as a coach in this state, that helps have that home connection with the 5 stars that he can help bring in. We have Connor Shaw, who's a former teammate. I think that could help him get that player connection that a new coach is always looking for. You did bring up he's never coached in the Power 5, and that is a huge kind of like red on the ledger because Power 5 is different. It's a different animal. But you see he's got Coastal Carolina. Granted, their schedule does not contain Power 5, but he's in the rankings with these Power 5 teams. And I think he could come in, get the wins he needs to win, the Vanderbilts, the Kentuckys, and Tennessees. And I think in 2-3 years, he could maybe be competing for the SEC East Championship.
A name that stuck out to me along this entire coaching process here, and a name that I think, for me personally, I think would be the best fit at South Carolina. How about Billy Napier out of Louisiana? The incredible job he's done down there with the Raging Cajuns. And let's look at his experience, right? Has he coached at a Power 5 school? Not as a head coach, but he's been an offensive coordinator at an ACC school and a Pac-12 school at Clemson and Arizona State, not to mention wide receivers coach at Alabama. So he has this experience coaching in Power 5 football. He can recruit for Power 5 football, and he's had success with the Raging Cajuns. 25-11, and now in his 3rd season there. 2 division titles in the Sun Belt. They're ranked year in, year out, outside of the AP Top 25. Incredible journey that he's taken this Raging Cajun program on. Rebuilt them, right? And now I think he's ready to come back to Palmetto State. Obviously, I mentioned he coached at Clemson. Obviously, he also coached at Furman and South Carolina State, both in-state schools here in the Palmetto State. And I think Billy Napier is a good time name to bring in here and rebuild the South Carolina program back from their current 2-5 mark back to the 9-11 win seasons that, let's face it, Gamecock fans just expect.
Yeah, I think he's a great choice. He's built Louisiana Tech to be a school that you kind of look at on your schedule as not quite a cupcake game anymore, a game you are just going to breeze through. He's kind of built it towards where like an App State on the team or a Coastal Carolina where you're going to have to prep a little more so you don't kind of get that behind the blind shot that they come in and steal a win on you, and he's done a great job down there.
Now, obviously we have to stay in-state here, and the next head coach that comes in is obviously going to have the in-state rival Clemson as one of the biggest roadblocks. Yeah. Dabo Swinney's done a pretty good job about keeping his staff intact in Tiger Town, but he's got two really, really good head coaching candidates on his staff. Tony Elliott, offensive coordinator, and Brent Venables, defensive coordinator. Jeff Scott, obviously, even last year, to take the South Florida head coaching job. So now the Dabo Swinney coaching tree is beginning to grow. As we wrap up here, Tony Elliott or Brent Venables, are they legitimate candidates here at South Carolina?
I think they are. I think you mentioned they've coached with Swinney, and he's done a great job with that team, taking them from where they were. So they got that leader mentality with them. Tony Elliott, you see, he coached at all the same schools Napier did: Furman, South Carolina State, Clemson. He's been around the state. He knows it well. I think in today's college football, it's offense. It's an offensive game. You need to score points. You look at Georgia, they have a top defense, but in their two good games, Bama and Florida, they couldn't score the points to win. I think you need to score points. He has been with Lawrence and Etienne and Higgins. They've all been scoring points game in and game out. And I think you bring him in here with the offense we have, with Marshawn Lloyd coming back off of injury, the breakout of Kevin Harris. I think he can do a lot with this offense.
Looking at this long list of candidates that we've talked about, if you're Ray Tanner, who's the one name you want coaching the South Carolina Gamecocks?
I think I want Steve Sarcasian, which is he's been with Bama, the mindset. He's been a head coach before in a Power 5 school. He's got that modern offensive mind. He works well with quarterbacks. I think him and Crenshaw would get along great and really fortify that offensive mind that you kind of need now in the SEC.
You're going Sarcasian. I'll take Billy Napier from the Raging Cajuns. Braden, thank you for joining us here this week on The Locker Room, and thank you as well. This wraps up our season of The Locker Room. We hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas season as well. Thank you all for tuning in to each and every episode we've had this season. For Braden Maloy, along with all of our other guests, I'm Cade Crenshaw. You've been watching The Locker Room, and we'll see you next year.